It's hard to know when to stand up and be counted. When is the right time? Is it yet? Or am I too late? If it is now, will I be the only one standing? Of course it's easier not to. It's easier to tell yourself that now is not the time. Or you can tell yourself, oh, I won't make any difference. What can I do? Or more usually, well, they'll probably do it anyway. And that's probably true. Or rather, all those things are true if you don't do anything. And it will seem as if deciding not to do anything, not to stand up, not to be counted, it will seem as if that is the right decision. The world will continue to turn, the sun will still come up the next morning, the lights will still come on, and water will still run from the taps. You'll still have your job, and your bills will still need to be paid. There will still be food in the fridge and petrol in your car. England will still lose at football after raising your hopes that this could indeed be the year we win it. Nothing will seem to have changed because of your decision not to stand up. So you can sit on your sofa, which is still where it was yesterday, switch the telly on, which is still vomiting out BBC propaganda, just the same as it did yesterday, and watch that other bloke who did get off his arse getting arrested on that march that you didn't go on. And having been arrested, justifiably or not, that guy may no longer have a job, and so perhaps his bills don't get paid, and maybe his house gets repossessed as a result. And then maybe his marriage goes on the slide, and then maybe he won't get to see his kids anymore. And maybe he won't get to see his kids anymore because he'll be in prison. So why didn't he do what you did and not go? Why, oh why didn't he just stay on his bloody sofa? Oh, I don't know. Maybe it's because he thought he lived in a country where a man could speak his mind without getting arrested. You know, like the one we used to live in. Maybe he thought it was necessary to show his face, not to be cowed, not to be bullied by the overmighty state that has somehow taken over his country. Maybe he wasn't prepared to signal his agreement, or even his acquiescence, by staying at home. Maybe he thought that his own democratically elected government, that instead of being his political servants, were behaving as if they were his political masters, and that they needed to be reminded of who is supposed to be serving who. Perhaps he thought that since his government was already watching him by capturing him on CCTV 400 times a day, was monitoring and logging his phone calls and his emails and what websites he was visiting, as well as tracking him in real time whenever he got in his car, then since they were already doing that, and he was in effect already living in an open prison, then he might just as well get captured on CCTV expressing his displeasure. And maybe he might think that by not talking, by not expressing his displeasure, and by not speaking his mind, he might just conceivably be making it easier for his prepubescent daughters to be snatched off the streets and repeatedly raped by gangs of Muslim men. Maybe that's why. So for this man, this fictional bloke of my imagination, the time was right, as it obviously has been for the tens of thousands who went on the Day for Freedom, the spontaneous protest to free Tommy, and the subsequent march for Tommy. It was time. It is time. Now, if you're like me and have given up on the mainstream media, the world via the internet, and YouTube in particular, appears to be a boiling cauldron whose lid is about to be blown clean off. But if you go back into the mainstream media world, it seems as if nothing is happening. Well, not nothing exactly, but the same old Theresa May versus Jeremy Corbyn viewpoints about who's the biggest disaster. throw in Boris, who's done or said something asinine, Brexit's a catastrophe, Trump's pissed off someone else, blah blah bloody blah. They are continuing to ignore us. But they had to report the protests about Tommy, since it couldn't be ignored. It was right in their faces. So that's the key. We have to make it so they can't ignore us. We need numbers. As a protesting novice, I'm a beginner at this. And what's more, it's not in my nature to be confrontational. I don't like it. It's unpleasant, and it means getting into arguments. I'm used to being polite to people, and I'm going to have to be impolite. And I'm British, so that's a big deal. But we're all going to have to do things we don't like. If we want to live in a free country, that is. And I do. Do you? So firstly, we have to show up in sufficient numbers. Secondly, we have to be firm. And if we are there in sufficient numbers, it will be easier to be firm. We need to be firm in not being bullied by the police. We need to be firm in not doing what we're told by the police. And perhaps more important than anything else, we need to be firm in not being provoked into doing something indefensible. Because as someone who's had trouble with his temper in the past, I'm telling you that the provocation will be ignored. Only the reaction will be remembered. And filmed, of course. Take it from someone who knows. Be angry. Be properly angry. Even make them afraid of your anger. But whatever you do, don't lose your temper. And we need to support each other. One thing I'm feeling from these protests is that the demographic is spreading. It's spreading from Tommy's original supporters through the football crowd, and now it's going into the, dare I say it, the polite middle classes, who in past times wouldn't have been seen dead at a Tommy Robinson event. So there may be some bemusement with our fellow travellers, maybe even some distrust. Tough working men are unused to marching for the same things as the polite middle classes, and vice versa. But we will be brothers in arms when we march, when we protest. So let's treat each other like brothers. And sisters, of course, as there are plenty of you too. But I believe the decent middle classes are now joining the fray, and that's a very, very good thing. It means that the political and chattering classes are going to have a lot more trouble in isolating us and calling us far right, because we're nothing of the kind. As one t-shirt cleverly put it, not far right, but not far wrong either. So you can reassure yourself and tell yourself that you did the sensible as opposed to the right thing when you stayed at home. Those that went and put their heads above the parapet have now broken cover and will now be monitored. In the manner of totalitarian regimes everywhere, their attitudes have now been noted. They will now be marked as troublemakers, and they will now remain in the focus of the surveillance state's unblinking eye. But your attitude, as a no-shower, will also have been noted, unbeknownst to you. Your mere interest in the subject will be flagged up by their algorithms, ready as evidence in the future, but they will conclude, for the time being, that your compliance can be taken for granted, that you are not a troublemaker. They will conclude that you will not stand up and you will not resist. They will conclude that you will always do what you are told. At least until they have isolated those that you chose not to stand beside. And once they have isolated them, they will come for you. There are a multitude of ways in which they will target you, perhaps after outlawing the FLA and the DFLA, any group that contains Tommy Robinson, as well as Big Brother Watch and Don't Spy on Us and Jihadi Watch and CCTV Watch, and maybe even respectable and venerable civil rights groups like Liberty. They will then categorise viewing content from such groups as extremist material and make it illegal to even watch it. There are already moves to outlaw content that they claim to be non-violent extremism. So even your interest in these subjects, even if you never actually do anything, will be considered subversive behaviour, to use another chilling phrase from the Fascist Handbook. Because even if you prove yourself to be not even the tiniest threat to the authorities, no matter what they do, they may, with the luxury of time and complete power, examine the possibility that somewhere down the line, sometime in the future, even a spineless worm like you may have a breaking point. And when you reach it, if you ever do, they'll be there, waiting with the handcuffs. And that, my friends, is the end game of the fascist. Power. Complete and unassailable power. So are you going to stand up? Stand for the freedom to speak your mind and stand beside your brothers? Are you? Or are you going to crack open another beer, watch from the sidelines and stay on your fucking sofa?